Welcome to Kremlin File, everyone. And today we have a very special guest, retired Major General Paul Eaton. Hello, Paul. Welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for this invitation.
Thank you.
We're very, very pleased that you've come. Exactly. Paul, for everyone, just so that everybody understands exactly, what retired Major General is, what he's done, is that he was a national security advisor, right, Paul, and director of VetVoiceFoundation, which elevates vet voices in American democracy, an advisor to VoteVets, which advocates on behalf of progressive veterans running for office, and also Gold Star family. So we're so pleased that you're here, with us today, speaking about the war, on Ukraine. And in a tweet, Paul, you wrote that this was in a tweet that we found on February the 28th. I mean, I follow your account and I follow, all of your comments and everything. And this one hit me in particular. And you said, to borrow from President Bush 43 lexicon, Putin has seriously underestimated Ukraine, NATO, the US, EU, and sanctions. For a trained KGB officer, this is a shocking failure. And I thought that was really, really interesting the way that you put that. And I mean, I did a bit of military studies at university, and I remember that our professor always used to say to us, look, in a campaign, in a war, there's always one side that underestimates the power, of who, the other army that they have, and also overestimates their own power and what they can do. So there's always this, let's say we looked at a lot of failures in battle and different things. But what we wanted to ask was, first of all, let's start a bit with what the state of the battle is right now, what the war on Ukraine is right now. What is going on? Just a very, very brief overview. And then I want to ask you, really, do you agree with this statement? Did they underestimate, why are the Russians, let's say, not doing as well, or if that's the case? And also the Ukrainian side, the Ukrainians and how they're fighting this. Okay. So let's start off with that.
All right. So what we see right now, the Russians have reverted to form of back to World War II. They have failed in the logistics arena. So we have tanks running out of gas, soldiers without ammunition, food, water. We've had all those bad things that come from a bad logistics operation. Everybody can be a tactician. Professionals are logisticians, is the saying that we have in the Army. The failure to be able to execute combined arms maneuver, integrating infantry, tanks, field artillery, missilery, aircraft, this has been an absolutely stunning surprise for the world, and the Russians have failed in this arena. What that leaves them with is indiscriminate anti-civilian rockets, missiles, artillery, and they are exacting the deaths of many innocents. So this is a surprise to many of us.
Yeah. It's funny you brought up logistics, because my professor used to say to me, logistics.
Indeed.
This is how, that's, one of the perhaps would you say that it's one of the most important things in battle? Are there other factors as well besides logistics?
The reason that Western armies tend to do very well is that the individual soldier has great faith in his leadership and his nation, and that the individual soldier, if he's hurt, he will be rescued. He will be tended to medically. He's not going to run out of ammunition. We won't let them run out of food and water. We will provide them the wherewithal to do their duties on the battlefield. So that faith that NATO armies, that the Anglo-Saxon armies, the armies that really do understand the value of the individual soldier. That's what keeps that young man and woman going.
Okay.
Yeah, and here, I mean, we've seen, I think, we're at 5 or 7 generals who have been killed in less than 3
Yeah.
weeks. I mean, it's
Yeah.
incredible to see, and these are generals who fought in several theaters, you know?
Indeed.
Yeah.
And when you start seeing very senior leaders die on the battlefield, it's because they have been forced to do and take on roles that Western armies delegate down to much younger folks. Generals need to see the battlefield. It is possible. You know, I was on the outskirts of Fallujah during the just before the Marines had to go in, and I was there with 3 other general officers. We were vulnerable at that point. Something could have happened, but it's very, very rare that you will see that level of exposure. And what that means is the Russians don't have the non-commissioned officer corps that we in the United States and Western armies enjoy. The fact that senior leaders have to go forward is an indicator of a serious lack of morale and competence at the junior ranks.
Okay, so they're throwing them. No, they need to go forward.
Indeed.
To bring the action forward. Okay, got it. And I wanted to ask about the intelligence. Do you think at all that maybe Putin and whoever was gathering intelligence, right, for this thing, that whether there was a failure in intelligence on the part of, let's say, the Russian intelligence services? Olga, would that be the FSB and the SVR? Which agencies take care of that?
Well, I mean, there is chatter. There is chatter. The 5th director at an FSB, you know, has been put under house arrest, and they were the ones who, you know, would have prepared the political situation on the ground in Ukraine and then provided it to military, who would then provide it to Putin. So, yeah.
So this could also be an intelligence failure as well.
Well,
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a combination. Go ahead, Paul.
No, I was just going to agree with you that the Russians just had no idea of the psychology. They failed to understand the nature of the Ukrainian citizen, and they failed to understand how much they feel to be Ukrainian citizens, and that they will fight for their homeland far harder than ever anticipated by the Russians.
How would you judge the performance of the Ukrainian military?
Yeah, let's go to the Ukrainians now.
Yeah, who's completely outgunned and outplaned, and you know, and really facing one of the biggest armies in the world.
Indeed. When we create a soldier, the way I talk about it, there are 3 major factors that you develop in a soldier, a successful future soldier. You develop him or her physically, that self-confidence that you get from physical fitness, that you really can leap tall buildings in a single bound, that we impart training, that the soldier is very, very confident in the use of his weapons, how he acts within the context of a fire team or rifle squad, speaking of infantry, or a artillery cannon crew. So all that's part of the training package. And the more training you have, the more successful the soldier will be, the more confident he will be. And then there's the moral component, what the British call the moral component, and something that the British Army has imparted to many armies in the world. And that is back to the belief that the chain of command is going to be there for him, that the soldier believes in his country, his constitution, and the civilian leadership that we have. All that goes into creating a far more noble and a far more capable soldier. And we have seen the Russian army completely outclassed by the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainian army to a degree that we just did not anticipate. They've taken learning how to use weapons that they have not used before, the Javelin, the Stinger missile, to great effect. We've seen them take Turkish drones and use them in anti-armor ambushes. The Ukrainian army has learned very, very quickly. They are very courageous, and they're not giving up.
Yeah, no. Well, they've also been fighting for 8 years as well, right,
Indeed.
Paul? So this also comes into, right? It comes into the factoring of also their success, right? I mean, this is
Indeed.
this is part of it.
If you've been through conflict, new conflict tends to there is a stress inoculation that happens in training and in warfare. And during World War II, if a pilot survived the first 5 engagements, was the general measure, there was a very high likelihood or a much higher likelihood that pilot would survive the war. So if you have battlefield experience, new battlefield challenges are easier to manage for the soldier in question.
Paul, so as we saw, because Russia's initial strategy was to take, key cities in a few days. Clearly that failed, and they haven't been able to get one city yet. And as we see it going on, we're now going into week 4, we see Russia turning to deadly tactics. And now they are specifically targeting civilian homes. Like in Mariupol, they destroyed 80% of the houses. They're targeting humanitarian corridors and basically committing war crimes that is being played out on, regular media and social media. We've seen this strategy before in Syria, in Libya, in Chechnya. And you and I had done a Twitter Spaces where you talked about your encounter with the Soviet army. Can you tell us about this?
So I'll give 2 snapshots with the same Russian unit. It was a Soviet unit, but born of Russia. The 27th Guards Motorized Rifle Division. So in the 70s and 80s, the army, the Soviet army opposite my division, I was a young captain commanding a mechanized team with tanks, and opposite me was a Russian captain equipped with tanks and with BMP, and we believed that the Russians on the other side of the border were 10 feet tall, that we had to work very, very hard to make sure that we were going to defeat them if they ever attacked. Obviously, it turned out not to be so. But roll the time forward and to 1994. So I commanded that company, 77, 78. 1994, I'm working with the 27th Guards Motorized Rifle Division as a colonel, and I had a Russian airborne background colonel who was my counterpart, and we got along very, very well. And the Russian soldiers were not particularly well trained, but they were engaging young men, and our men and the Russian soldiers got along very well. And the difference in the units was that we would transmit to our soldiers the commander's intent, and our individual soldiers would understand what the desired outcome was to be for a given operation. That did not take place with the Russian soldier. The Russian soldier we found to be far less informed than our guys, and that, as I mentioned earlier, there was an absence of non-commissioned officers. So we witnessed officers having to do what young sergeants do, young corporals do in the American Army. And that just, that distributed command and control, that distributed initiative, the allowing for initiative by young men and women makes Western armies far more potent. And that learning from 1994 is bearing out today in what we are seeing with the Russian performance in Ukraine.
Yeah, it's fun. Can I just, I have one question because I wanted to hook up with what you're saying on the chain of command and also communications, because you wrote this on March the 19th. The center of gravity in this fight is the Russian people. The vector to influence this outcome is obviously communications. Now, you're talking about communications, right, on the battlefield themselves, right? Taking initiative, being, let's say.
We can talk communications at the tactical level and communications writ large. We give radios to individual soldiers, 18-year-old, 19-year-old individual soldiers. They can communicate with each other and they can communicate up. The chain of command obviously can communicate left, right, and downward and upward. When I mentioned communications with respect to the Russian people, I have greater faith in the Russian people writ large as a civilization, as a culture, based on what I have seen over the years, than the trigger puller, lanyard puller, button pushing war criminal is achieving in Ukraine. The Russian people are a noble and civilized people, and we have to reach out to them. We have to reach out to the mothers of all these soldiers in Ukraine and give them a clear picture of what's really going on, because right now the Russian people have been sold a bill of goods that is untrue, and we need to, I don't know if it's Starlink satellites that we populate the skies over Russia by Elon Musk. He just got a rocket off with I think 150 of these things. So we need to get communications to the Russian citizen.
And to add to Paul, there is questions now being asked by the Russian mothers and just, the Russian families of what is happening because they've lost communications with their family members inside Ukraine. So they are beginning to ask questions and, to deaf ears because they're not getting anything from the investigative committee or the military, nothing. So
we talked about this.
And on Ukraine's behalf, they have, set up a hotline for captured Russian soldiers, for any family member who wants them back, that they can come to Kiev and, collect their family member, which at the same time they could see what is happening on the ground, and that what Putin is feeding them is a complete lie.
So just getting information to them that is factual information. That's such an important thing right now. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I agree. We have to get that information. For several weeks, we've seen Russia laying the groundwork, and I've been documenting a lot of it, for the use of chemical weapons, for, the Ukrainians have rigged nuclear plants. We know that Russia, within the first week, took a siege of 2 nuclear plants, and they took hostage the people working inside the plants, and we haven't had communication with them. Where do you see this going? Because Russia, again, yesterday said that the West and Ukrainian nationalists, and they had two different reports come out from the Defense Ministry, which are lies, that the West and Ukrainian nationalists are preparing an attack on Lviv, and another one they started naming locations in Sumy. Where do you see this going, and what would happen as far as the United States and European reaction if Russia does use chemical weapons, or God forbid, even causes a nuclear accident?
Chemical weapons are not a militarily useful weapon. You might surprise a unit, but they will immediately protect themselves. So you might get casualties in a first strike, unlikely that it will happen again. We've seen the use of chemicals in World War I, and all armies quickly adapted to defend themselves from these terrible weapons. And so you didn't see chemical weapons in use during World War II. Now, you've seen chemical weapons used in Syria against unprotected populations, unprotected civilians. And they are a weapon of terror. They will cause people to leave the objective area that is under attack from chemical weapons, simply because that's their only defense, is to run away from the weapon. And that's if Mr. Putin were to use chemical weapons, and if we were to see civilian casualties, and they're gruesome weapons, and the effects on humans is appalling. And if we were to see that, what would NATO do? And U.S., of course, a component of NATO, the largest size-wise component of NATO. I would not be surprised to see a visceral reaction to the use of chemicals against Ukrainian population. And I believe that you would see some military activity, perhaps short of invading Russia, perhaps short of delivery of munitions in the Russian territory. But you might see anti-ship activity. You might see a move on the Baltic port of Kaliningrad, and perhaps in the Far East, in Sakhalin, and out, just strategic, a strategic demonstration to the Russians that this could get very, very serious very, very quickly. And this threat of the use of nuclear weapons is an interesting bit of psychology. When we wargame use of nuclear weapons, it's a psychological endurance test. And because if you, and the book 20, I think it's the book 2034 that recently came out. It's a novel about a war between China and the United States. And what happens if things are not going well? Things are not going well in Ukraine. And you fire a tactical nuclear weapon against a city of 50,000 people, say. Just throw that out there. 50,000 people. Would the country, if it was a nuclear-armed country, like Great Britain or France, it would be very dangerous to do that to the United States, because we still have enough nuclear weapons, even after all the reductions that have gone on, that a first strike would be absolutely devastating. Now, part of the problem with nuclear warfare, if you don't have enough weapons to kill your opponent's nuclear weapons, take out his submarines, take out his bomber fleets, take out his land-based missiles, then that's a counter force approach in the use of nuclear weapons. That may push you into a euphemism called counter value, and that's actually killing cities. And the United States has that capacity. Russia certainly has that capacity. China has been building up their nuclear stockpile. They've got some range issues, but all this could very, very quickly go high order, very bad for humanity, obviously. So all the nuclear war games that we had involved the use of battlefield nuclear weapons in the beginning. The American Army used to have, and the Russians as well, backpack nukes to drop bridges, to cut lines of communication. We had a nuclear mortar in the 50s, because we just, it was called the Pentomic Army, but even when I was a captain, the artillery unit that supported my unit was nuclear capable. 155 millimeter in diameter weapon that is fired from a howitzer, and we're talking a hardened howitzer that could deliver this weapon up to 18, 20 kilometers. And once that happens, then the other side will use a similar weapon, and it very quickly escalates into a full-blown nuclear exchange. And it's that breakdown of mutually assured destruction that happens, MAD. If MAD breaks down, then the deterrent value of nuclear weapons fails, and you will have an absolutely catastrophic event for mankind.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I think most people, it's the first thing, people who don't know much about the war or what is happening, the very mention of a nuclear threat of any kind is really, really disturbing. They don't understand, as what you're saying, the different escalation and things like that. They're very, very scared. I mean, this is what I'm getting from a lot of people that are just normal people that don't know much.
And Russia.
Yeah, exactly.
And Russia's doing a very good job of spreading the disinformation online and using it for psyops on social media, because like every other comment I see in my, tweets is, oh, but Russia's a nuclear power, or Russia's a nuclear power, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not talking about nuclear.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, civilian building being bombed.
Also, because I'm sure, the arms that they have now are destructive without even getting into nuclear, right? I mean, the power and the reach of what is happening, we see it, every day of what's going on. So,
indeed,
we don't even have to get into that, unfortunately.
Speaking of powerful weapons, CNN yesterday said that U.S. officials said that Russia used hypersonic missiles in Ukraine. Can you talk to us about that? And what, because we've heard so much about the dangers of hypersonic missiles, and Russia has threatened us with hypersonic missiles over the years. What is the impact of it inside of Ukraine?
I haven't seen any classified information regarding hypersonic weapons, but if you have a missile that reaches 9 or 10,000 kilometer an hour speed, 5,000 mile an hour weapon, it's hard to knock it down. Cruise missiles, much slower missiles. Some can be brought down with air defense systems that are in play right now. S-300, S-400, Patriot, maybe even Stinger against a cruise missile that's moving at 400 knots. But the hypersonic, the only real value, I think, is that it's very tough to bring down, which is obviously a consideration. But there's been a lot of hype around these things, and I'm just not sure if it's justified. I don't know that.
Okay. Okay. All right. Mo?
I just have a question, actually. Yeah, before we finish, well, let's say the only other question that I wanted to ask was, are you getting any indications at all, Paul, of Belarus and whether they will be stepping in, and if that will change things tremendously or not? Because, it depends on the kind of troops they're going to be sending and their preparedness and their material, I'm sure, right? The kind of kit they have and stuff like that. But what is your opinion on that? Do you know anything or would like to express your comments on Belarus?
Anytime you open up another front, in a combat zone, that's one more place that the defending military needs to focus on. So it diverts attention from Russia. But President Zelensky today on the Fareed Zakaria program said that they believe that they took missile fire from Belarus in the beginning days of this invasion. So I don't know. I did not know that. I assume it's the president is speaking from a true understanding of what happened. But we've also seen Russia ask for assistance from China, from Syria. He's using Chechens because he's short manpower, which is hard to believe. We keep finding out more bad things that are going on in the Russian military. So for Mr. Putin to press Belarus into the fight, that would be unfortunate for Belarus, and because it's not going to change the outcome.
Yeah, it's very interesting because we are seeing, more and more exposed about the Russian military. And I think it's partly, I don't know if you would agree, because they've never fought such a widespread battle. Like normally they've, assisted in Syria or they, in Chechnya, but it was never so widespread of planning to take over a country. And I think because it was so widespread, we're seeing, and the morale and just, all the conditions, the lack of communication, we're seeing the Russian military that was feared is now it's like, what happened? This is what the world was worried about, My final question, what do you see happening? Where do you see this going? What can the U.S. and Europe do more to support Ukraine and to help them, fight? And what also would happen if, because the foreign minister Lavrov had threatened, echoing a prior threat, that if that our deliveries to Ukraine are legitimate targets. So how long do you see that corridor open that we can still get weapons inside of Ukraine? And what else can we do, and to help stop this mass killing of civilians?
We need to increase the number of systems going into Ukraine, and we need to have alternate paths so that if they come under attack, that we're still getting what we need into Ukraine to support the Ukrainian military. We need to expand the use of anti-ship missiles. We've got Russian ships firing cruise missiles with impunity right now. I think if we send several of those ships to the bottom of the ocean, we would be well served, and that is not a big reach here. Norwegians have a pretty good system that I think the American Navy uses, and if you knock down a couple of ships, that would be terrific. I think that we need to increase the threat from ground-based anti-air missile systems. I saw a U.S. senator state that the S-300 is now deployed into Ukraine. And now there's discussion of the S-400, which is a more potent system than the S-300, perhaps coming from Turkey. I mean, the Turks have done a lot of good for Ukraine and with their drones, and we're seeing perhaps Switchblade drones coming from the United States going into to assist. So it's this grinding attrition warfare that's going on right now will get worse for the Russians, and the response with artillery and missiles will be worse for the Ukrainian population. So I believe that best outcome is a negotiated outcome, that we give something to President Putin, and we give peace to President Zelensky. We achieve a ceasefire that becomes durable, and that Putin can say, I have achieved my military objectives, we're going home, don't make me come back. Right. And then we start a Marshall Plan to bring Ukraine back online, that we help them rebuild, use a lot of Russian money to do it. And we just, that I believe is the best outcome. This grinding attrition warfare cannot last. I mean, it can't last.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much for providing your invaluable expertise on this. And God knows, we all have so many questions on where this is going, and
Olga, you're very kind. Monique, very kind. Thank you very much.
Okay, so people can follow Paul at Paul D. Eaton 52. Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, have a good rest of your Sunday. Thank you very much.
Hey, everybody. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and please visit our website, KremlinFile.com. This is a Bunker Crew Media production hosted by Olga Lautman and me, Monique Camarra, with executive producers Marley Clements, Jack Bryan, Grant DeSimone, Ben Brett, and Jordy Mycelis of Midas Media, with associate producers Ruby Frankel and Sarah Metz. Theme music by Oreste Camarra. Sound editing and mixing by Joy Ellett. Subscribe to Kremlin File wherever you listen to podcasts.